we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Madeline Black, and I'm going to be your host today for this webinar. Welcome to the second installment of our Level Up series. The goal of this series is to expand your skill set and make sure you're getting the most out of working with Column. Today, we're going to be covering custom settings for individuals and organizations, but before we get into it, just a couple of notes. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit questions to Q&A, and we will answer all of those for you at the end. Also, this is our second installment of this series. I want to make sure you're getting the most value out of the time you spend here today. So if there's anything that we can do to improve our format or any other topics that you want us to cover, please let us know. And then finally, we are recording this. So if you have any friends or colleagues that weren't able to make it today, please feel free to share it out. I also think some introductions are in order. So for those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Madeline Black, and I'm Column's Field Marketing Manager. I often find myself at conferences, hosting workshops, similar to the one that we're going through today. And I am excited to introduce Emily Meffert. She is Column's Senior Customer Support Specialist and spends her time solving problems for advertisers as well as our enterprise publishing partners. She's here today to take us through all of the custom rates and customer settings available within Column. But before I pass things over to Emily, I want to take a moment to share why it's important to have your custom settings configured in Column. And really, to boil it down, it's about providing a better customer experience, both for you and for your advertisers. On average, companies that have the best customer experience bring in 5.7 times more revenue than their competitors that lag behind. 69% of customers considered customer experience to be very important to their brand loyalty. And finally, companies that can improve the customer journey see operating costs lower by 15 to 20%. So really, by focusing on customer experience, you can increase your revenue, retain your customers, and lower your operating costs. So tying that back over to our custom settings, you can configure your payment options to ensure your customers pay you on time. You can set custom discounted rates for you and your top advertisers to incentivize them to come back to you. And finally, by having Column handle all of the details, your teams can save time and dedicate it to more important work. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to Emily to take us through our settings.
So as Madeline noted, I work on Column support team. So day to day, I encounter customers from all over, and they're all a little bit different. Some of the newspapers I work with want notice management to be very hands-on, whereas others are aiming to reduce manual work as much as possible. Some prefer to use the same rate on all the notices they process, whereas others opt to set a distinct rate for every notice type. Some wish to manually invoice every ad, whereas others opt to use automated invoicing. I could go on and on. Our publishing partners are unique, and we continuously strive to build features that are customizable in order to reflect the different needs and preferences among the folks who use our app. While the support team at Column is happy to field any question we receive, Column hopes to enable our customers to autonomously navigate our app and to equip our customers to address issues on their own should they arise. So today we're going to walk through the process of creating and adjusting rates, and then I will give an overview of all the custom settings that you can set up for your customers. So I'll share my screen. Great. So when you sign into your Column account at column.us/login, this is the screen that you'll see. So you have your notices table with your active notices, your archived notices, and your drafts if you've created any. We are going to focus on your settings today, so I will head over to this upper right corner where the gear icon appears. Under my account, you'll see the settings for your individual account. However, because we're focused on newspaper settings, I am going to click My Organization. So in this menu here on the left, you'll see all of the different kinds of settings for your newspaper. You have your newspaper information, advertising deadlines, members, affidavit settings, rates, and I'm going to pause here because we're focused on rates today. So in your rates table, you will see tabs for both your liner rates and your display rates. And then within the table, you'll see this actions column where you're able to edit the rates as well as remove rates if need be. You'll see a description of each rate. So this is just to indicate to you what the rate is. You know, it's if it's the default liner rate, whether it's a rate for a specific notice type, for a particular user, etc. And then the rate type. if it's a rate by line, by column inch, if it's a flat rate, etc. And then you can also indicate whether you want to charge the same for every run, or if the second run, the rate should be slightly lower for 3+ runs, etc. And then you can also set a minimum cost for the rate type. Under the liner rates, you'll see NA for round off in inches, because this is specific to the display rates. If you want to round by a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch, you can indicate it in that column. And finally, the rate code is something that we use internally to configure the rate on the back end. And so you are not able to change the rate code, but it shouldn't have any impact on your rate settings or the advertiser's experience of placing a notice. So first of all, to edit a rate, you can use the edit button, and you'll be able to do it right in the table. So you have the opportunity to adjust the name of the rate, the description, and then if you want to change the rate type, you can do that as well. Display inch, word count, flat rate, rate by line, etc. And then you can adjust the cost of the rate. So, we've increased the price of our notice to creditors rate to $85, so I can do that here. The minimum I'll set to 85. And to save the changes, I will click the check mark here, and then we'll see the rate updated in the table. To create a new rate, I'm going to use this plus sign button here in the upper right. And then I'll see essentially the same thing that I saw when I was editing. So I'll have the opportunity to add a description. I'm going to set up a name change rate. So we'll add that here. And then this is going to be a flat rate. So I will select that. And the cost for a name change notice in my paper is $100. So I'm going to add that under the first run. And since it's a flat rate, there won't be subsequent charges for additional runs. It's going to run 4 times because that is the legal requirement. So I'm just going to put $0 and $0 and the 2 runs and the 3+ runs, and then the minimum is going to be $100. So I'm going to review this and everything looks correct, and then I will use again the check mark to save, and then that will appear here in my table. If I were to enter a display rate, then I would see it appear under the display rates tab. And then last thing, on the rates settings, you'll notice that there is this option to default to requiring upfront payment here in the upper right. So if you decide that for all of the customers placing notices in your paper, you want them to submit payment ahead of publication. If they don't, their notice is not going to run according to schedule. You can use this toggle to turn on that setting. If you want to require upfront payment from almost all of your advertisers, you can turn this on. And then for specific advertisers who do not need to pay upfront, you can adjust their customer settings to indicate as much. So I will transition over to the customer settings. And so under this tab, you will see a list of all of the customers who have placed notices in your paper. You'll see their name, their email address. If your newspaper has a legacy system that is integrated with Column, and you want to connect the customers on your end with the Column accounts, you can add a ID. Otherwise, you don't need to add an internal ID. You'll see their status. So whether they are registered in Column or not registered. For instance, if you place a notice on behalf of an advertiser, but the advertiser doesn't follow up to complete registration in Column, then they wouldn't actually be registered, but they would still be one of your customers because a notice has been associated with them. So you'll see their status there. And then finally, under the actions column, you'll see a pencil icon, which will give you the opportunity to edit the settings for a given customer. So if I click on Zelda's name, I will see all of the details for Zelda's account. I will also see her account settings. So I will see what her default liner rate is and the display rate that is the default for her. I will also see whether upfront payment is required for this user and whether my newspaper allows Zelda to access affidavits ahead of submitting payment. So if I am looking at Zelda's settings and I see that, actually, we are always going to require upfront payment from Zelda, but her settings do not reflect as much. I can use this edit button here in the lower right corner to change that. So you can edit both the personal details for a user as well as the preferences for them. You'll probably spend more time here in this bottom section, but for instance, if you're mailing an affidavit to a user and you notice that their address is wrong, or maybe they've moved, you can edit their address here. But you'll again probably spend most of your time adjusting their preferences here in this bottom section. So Zelda actually belongs to Easy Storage. That is her organization. So she should not be charged the government rate. So to adjust that, I'm going to click on the rate description and then select an item from the drop-down menu. So Easy Storage rate, I will put that there. I do not have an integration with Column, so I'm not going to enter an internal ID for Zelda. And then I can also adjust the upfront payment requirement. Since I'm always going to require upfront payment for Zelda, I will choose always require. If upfront payment were the default for my newspaper, so basically all of my advertisers are required to pay upfront, but I don't want Zelda to have to pay upfront, I could select never require. And then finally, you can allow certain advertisers to access their affidavits ahead of submitting payment. So by default, all of the newspapers that partner with Column require advertisers to submit payment ahead of accessing their affidavit. However, there are some organizations, we see this a lot with government organizations, that require proof of publication before they're able to submit payment. So in those cases, you can toggle on this setting and then click Save to save the changes. Because I'm going to require upfront payment from Zelda, I'm not going to turn this on, but I will click Save. I can see this confirmation that the changes have been successfully saved. And then I will pop over to the organization tab here on Zelda's profile. So under this tab, I will see all of the organizations that the user belongs to. Zelda just belongs to one, so I just see Easy Storage here. To see the organization's settings, I can click on the organization name. Under this first tab are all of the basic details for the organization. Under the second tab, members, I will see everyone who belongs to the organization in Column, as well as their user role. So Zelda is an admin. If she were a billing user, I would see that there. If she were a standard user, I would see user. And then finally, under this last tab, settings, I will see whether the organization is required to submit payment upfront, always, never, or if they just have the default setting for the newspaper. If I want to update that, again, I'll use the edit button here in the lower right and scroll to the bottom. And if I want Easy Storage to never be required to submit upfront payment, I can select never require and then save. But it's important to remember, for instance, if I have set the upfront payment requirement for Zelda's account to always require, but her organization to never require, it's going to default to the customer setting. So even if Zelda belongs to an organization that for which we never require upfront payment, because upfront payment is always required on Zelda's account, she's going to have to submit payment in order for her notice to run according to schedule. And then I can click Save to save those changes. And if I, rather than searching by customer, want to look at organizations within Column, I can use this Organizations tab. And we've just got one organization that has placed notices in the good times, but if there were a lot, I can use the search bar to find the organization that I'm looking for. So it's important for you to take advantage of customizing your customer settings as well as your rates, because when customers are able to go into the notice placement flow, have the correct rate applied to their notice, they have a really seamless experience of using Column. They don't need to reach out to you at the newspaper. They don't need to reach out to the Column support team to take a bunch of additional unnecessary steps to have their notice placed and make sure they're invoiced correctly. So it just creates a really positive experience for advertisers, for you at the newspaper, as well as for us here at Column. So positive experiences all around. But I am going to pass things back to Madeline to wrap up.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. That was a really good overview of all of our custom rates, custom settings for both individuals and for organizations. We're about to get into our Q&A in a moment, so please start sending in any questions. But while those are coming in, I want to kick things off to get started. So Emily, what happens if there's something that I want to customize for an advertiser, but I don't see that as an option in the settings and app?
Yeah, great question. So it's possible that we are able to customize some settings for advertisers on our back end. So I would always encourage someone to contact the support team at help@column.us if you want to customize a setting that you don't see how to do that in app. And then if we don't have the ability to do so on our back end, we can always work with our product team to perhaps introduce a feature that would allow for that customizability.
Great. And then now looking at the chat from Marco, if we toggle the option to require upfront payment, will that affect already established accounts that may not require upfront payment?
If you toggle on the upfront payment requirement, it will not impact customers that you have already set to never require upfront payment. So toggle on upfront payment requirement for all customers of your paper. The customers that are set to never require still will not have to submit upfront payment.
However, if in your account you currently don't require upfront payment by default, and those customers that are just default not don't require upfront payment, it will update to that new default for all of those customers. So you would have to adjust that if you do change what your default is. Next from Lori, when a customer changes their email or maybe the employee no longer works for the organization, is there an easy way to change the email associated with an organization?
To change the email associated with an organization, if that email is already linked to an individual's Column account, we just need to add that individual to the given organization. If the email address does not already belong to a Column account, we would just need to create a new organization with the email address.
Cool. I think, Lori, does that answer your question? I think, yes. Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's all the questions that were submitted to the chat. If there's anything else, we will be happy to stick around for the next couple minutes to see if there's anything else that comes in. And I just have a few last notes before we really get things wrapped up here. So as a reminder, this was recorded, so please send this out to anyone who you think might enjoy it. And then next week, we are hosting at the same place, same time. We're going to do a deep dive into our automated affidavit notarization. So please, if you're interested, join us for that. And then the week after, on March 8th, is The Brief. That is our quarterly product launch series, and I am very excited about it. There's going to be a lot new exciting things that we're going to discuss there. And that's all from me. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us. As always, please continue to use our team as a resource for your business. You can always reach out to our support team at help@column.us or by visiting help.column.us. I see one more thing in the chat. Oh, no, just thanks. See you next time. Thanks, Lori. Bye, everyone.